Ubisoft came to E3 2018 with not one massive game to show off, but two, both of which are launching pretty soon. And while Assassin's Creed Odyssey's showing has deservedly been receiving plaudits from tons of people, the reveal for The Division 2 was also a solid one. Lots of new gameplay was shown off, along with one pretty cool looking cinematic trailer, and from everything Ubisoft has shown and said so far, it looks like they're going to fix some of the most major problems most people had with the original The Division, and finally deliver on its immense promise. In this feature, we're going to take a look at the 15 most vital new details you need to know before you pre-order the game. The setting. While The Division was set in a post-pandemic New York, The Division 2 is changing things up by taking us to the political center of the United States in Washington, D.C., and with the change in setting comes a pretty significant change in the style of map we'll be playing in. Gone are New York's cramped and densely packed city streets, giving way to wider, more open spaces, wider boulevards, and more variety in terms of landscapes and environments. Narrative setup. It also looks like the narrative setup of The Division 2 is taking things one step further from what we saw in the first game. Sure, it's still in the backdrop of the pandemic, and will still be dealing with its aftermaths, but it'll be going about it in a very different way, and from what it looks like so far, a very interesting way. Because this time around we're going to be dealing with a civil war that has broken out in the heart of the nation in the ashes of the epidemic. There's not much we know about it beyond that yet, but it does seem like a significantly more interesting setup. Here's hoping the game doesn't let it go to waste. Summer. While The Division was dominated by a white-blue color palette, being set in the middle of winter with the player being surrounded by snow, ice and cold metal everywhere they went, its sequel is going for a much more warmer approach, quite literally, because The Division 2 is going to be set in summertime. In fact, according to Ubisoft, this summer is one of the hottest summers there has ever been. The warmer, summery vibe in all the footage we've seen makes for a nice change of pace from the constant barrage of white in the first game, and hopefully it'll make for more visual variety as well. There certainly was a lot more greenery in the gameplay that we're used to seeing in The Division. The visuals. Something that was immediately noticeable in the gameplay we saw of The Division 2 was just how beautiful it looked. Now we know not to take this stuff by face value anymore, especially when it comes to Ubisoft. Games such as Far Cry 3, Watch Dogs and the original Division itself all debuted with trailers that looked unbelievably stunning, and went on to be subject to drastic drops in visual quality. But while we're not holding out hope that The Division 2 will look exactly as good as it did in the footage we saw, we're hoping it'll be very close. Because not only have Ubisoft's practices been much better in this regard more recently, such as with the likes of Assassin's Creed Origins and Far Cry 5, but also because, unlike the first game's reveal, The Division 2's launch is not actually that far away, meaning the final product will be reasonably close to what we've seen so far, hopefully. Dynamic world. This is one more area where Ubisoft's practices have seen quite a noticeable shift in recent years, with the prime examples once again being Assassin's Creed Origins and Far Cry 5. Their open worlds used to be static, by-the-numbers maps until quite recently, littered with bloat and meaningless collectathon content. With these two games though, we saw them going for more dynamic, organic maps with much fluider content. The Division 2, it seems, is going to continue moving in that direction. That will be driven mostly through the game's factions. Washington DC's survivors, civilians and factions are going to be fighting against each other for their survival, for things like ammunition and resources, and these conflicts are, as per Ubisoft's claims, going to spark dynamic events that players can get involved in. Working closely with civilians and keeping them safe will also result in them returning the favour by coming to your aid by, for instance, giving you extra supplies. We're curious to see how this pans out. On paper, it sounds very cool, but we're hoping Ubisoft will reveal more details on this soon. Tougher enemy units. One very interesting bit from the gameplay demo shown off during the Microsoft conference was when the players took on a hulking armored enemy unit. It was interesting because it implied that the Division 2 will have tougher enemies, not just in the sense that they'll do more damage and have more health, though that might very well be true as well. No, the gameplay showed the players employing actual tactics to shoot off the enemy's armor pieces to expose its weak spots and to make it more vulnerable to damage, making use of tactics such as flanking and using multiple weapons. Enemy AI in general seems to have improved drastically. Hopefully we'll see plenty of these encounters in The Division 2. New weapons. The Division 2 will also be adding some pretty interesting new weapons to the mix. For instance, there's the Wasp Hive, which launches several tiny drones into the air to seek out and attack enemies like a swarm of bees. There's the Seeker Mine, which can be released from a distance to lock onto the closest enemy and detonate in proximity. Then there's the Assault Drone, which can be controlled remotely to attack enemies. While there's the Chem Launcher, which sounds like the most interesting of the bunch, which can shoot different kinds of chemicals such as corrosive acid or some repairing bots or explosive chemicals. Endgame Overhaul. One of the aspects of The Division that disappointed people more than almost all the others was the fact that, at least at launch, the game felt a little lacking in its endgame content. Ubisoft seemed to be looking to make amends on that front. Once you're done with the campaign in The Division 2 and have hit level 30, you'll open the gateway to a whole meaty bunch of content. There's so much of it, in fact, that in many ways it can be said that the real game will begin only after you're done with the main campaign. Let's look a little deeper into just how that's going to be done. Specializations. For starters, as soon as you've hit level 30, you'll move past the threshold of the initial stuff the game has planned for its players, and will be asked to pick one of the 3 specializations, with each of these unlocking a signature weapon that you'll be able to use. Survivalists will be armed with a crossbow and will be adept at making use of traps and hazards. Demolitionists will be all-out attack units armed with grenade launchers, while sharpshooters will have a sniper rifle as their signature weapon. New mechanics. Beyond these new weapons, specializations will also come with other mechanics that The Division 2 is adding to the mix. Each specialization will allow players to pick distinct playing styles, and each will come with its own progression system, not to mention unique skills, mods, and talents. Just how much these 3 specializations are going to differ from each other is something Ubisoft haven't gone into too much detail about, but from the looks of it, it seems like it's definitely going to be a major game changer. If nothing else, endgame content in the game is going to be a lot more meaningful. Dark Zone. Of course, when one thinks of endgame content in The Division, one immediately thinks of the Dark Zone. Thankfully, it's going to make a return in The Division 2. Just like in the original, the Dark Zone will be the main hub of all PvP activity, and this will also be where players can find the best loot in the game, while Ubisoft have also promised that they've made balancing changes to make sure that it's no longer skewed in favour of higher level players. The Dark Zone was a concept that could be described as a diamond in the rough back when The Division first launched, and over time it's only gotten better, so we're quite excited to see how it improves in the upcoming sequel. Raids. But that's not all. One of the biggest and most exciting new additions to The Division 2, which is going to add incredible longevity to the game, even past the point of its narrative's conclusion, will be raids. Yes, raids are indeed coming to The Division. So far they sound pretty similar to what you might be used to seeing in Destiny, except the fact that raids in this game will be 8-player events. Other than these few bits, we don't know much about this, so here's hoping Ubisoft talks about it a bit more soon. Clans. Something else that's going to be a pretty significant addition in The Division 2, though obviously not as significant as specializations or raids for instance, is clans. Players in the game will be able to form clans now, which, well, yeah, it makes sense, I guess. It's a co-op shared world experience, so forming clans seems like the logical thing to do. What's worth wondering, however, is how, or if actually, forming clans will have an impact on how you interact with your clan mates during Dark Zone excursions. Year 1 content. There was a bunch of big news about The Division 2's wealth of content during E3, but perhaps this was the most notable one. Ubisoft announced to no one's surprise that they're going to keep adding content for the game for a long time after it's launched, making the endgame even meatier. During the first year of the game, they'll launch 3 major new expansions, containing map expansions, new game modes, and new story missions. Notably enough though, all that content is going to be absolutely free. Seriously, you have to tip your hat to Ubisoft for that. Beta. The Division 2 launches on March the 15th next year for the Xbox One, PS4 and PC, but players will have a chance to play a good chunk of it before that. There will be a closed beta for the game before it launches, and applications for it are already open. Ubisoft haven't however announced when that beta will go live, though obviously we're expecting we'll be hearing a lot more about it pretty soon.
And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from Gaming Bolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.